So this is the FinTech Strategic Space. This is our latest report.
Right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for spending your time with me, and hopefully I can be some use to you. This is the financial services world which I grew up in. One enormous walled garden. There was only one way in, and there was only one way out. There was no choice. It was totally controlled by humans. You went along to another human and you begged for a loan. You begged for a credit card. You begged for them to credit your payroll check to your account. That has completely changed, completely out of sight. When I started to research this whole area, I learnt a big word, which hopefully I can say, called disintermediation. That means everything is all over the place, and it confused me for a while. Everything is all over the place, but it has a structure. And here it is. Right, I just need to refer to my notes. The structure, how I got this structure, it came from observing a customer's journey through the whole new area of financial services. So you start off down the bottom, and you might lend some money using Zopa. You might do your expense forms using Global Expense. You might send some money to a friend overseas using Currency Cloud. You might earn some Tesco points on your electricity bill. You then start to go into the more traditional financial services area, so identity and security becomes important. My card might prove your identity to somebody. You might generate a transaction from Monetize on your mobile phone. You might have your account processed by FizServe, an absolutely massive North American bank accounting company. You might have your account holding in a branded and segmented way in the Simple Bank. You might consolidate all your value in Mint. You might look for price and discovery, branded from your local bank, but developed by Strands Finance. You could use Credit Sesame to look for price and product discovery. That takes you into the products. Asset management, funding platforms, loans, risk, and currency exchanges. And there's one more force at work which perpetuates all of this, all of these areas. And it's social media, points and gamification, and news and information. Can you get news today? You can get so much information, it does your brain in. Hence, you need intelligent systems to sort it out for you.
Okay, Ian, can I just come in? This is quite a bold thing to say this is a new value chain of new finance, okay? And most people wouldn't be brave enough to draw this up. Does anybody recognise this? Is this right or not? Does anyone want to comment on this?
My comment would be that whilst I recognise all of that, there remains an element of the old system in that, unlike my mobile phone, I can't take my account number with me wherever I go, so I'm locked into my incumbent bank unless I'm particularly inclined to go through the pain in the neck process of changing it. And there remains a tension around this new strategic value chain and the existing walled garden.
Yeah, if you look at Mint, what Mint does, it actually consolidates all your value from all over the place. So it will take a feed from Barclays Bank or NatWest Bank or Royal Bank of Scotland. So it's using the existing infrastructure. I'm not saying the existing infrastructure will disappear. It still will be there, but there'll be new ways of using and driving it.
Okay, Andy's going to give us one from back here.
Yeah, my personal comment was I don't think that diagram is correctly presented. I think that you've got a lot of the key areas on it, but I think what's distinct about the new way of doing business in fintech is actually the network effects rather than the much more linear approach. And I think that having a much more, it's much more like a food web as opposed to a food chain, whereas the old way of doing things was much more linear. If you wanted to make a payment, you did it through your bank. Now I can do it through my bank, I can do it through my PayPal. There's probably many other ways that people can think of that you could make a payment. That diversity of choice, the many branching paths that you can take to complete the same outcome is not something that we saw, in the early 80s or, when the old school was starting to be broken down.
No, I would completely agree with you. It is a network. I've just chosen this way to explain it in a linear fashion.
Just take one more from Michael.
Hi. Just responding to your comment. I think you can't access your account from other banks, but I believe HSBC will actually allow you to see your balances if you're a HSBC customer. So the wall is, I think it's fluid. So I think it's HSBC and I think Barclays as well in particular are already trying to negotiate around outside of that walled garden, so to speak.
It's very interesting because I've been trying to map the value chain also. The way in which I'm looking to this strategic space is from a functional point of view. So what are the main functions that a bank has? For each of those functions, there are many new players that are coming in. And some of the functions have a more crowded space around them because it's easier, and some of them not. And those functions are associated with a certain life cycle of different type of consumers. So you have a 2-dimension associated with, the way in which we can look at the space. So just a comment.
I would completely agree with you. It is multi-dimensional, and people are figuring ways to sell financial products to groups of customers which the banks have ignored, i.e. people whom you would think would have a bad credit risk. When you actually lend to them, you have remarkably low credit failures on the loans.
Okay, Emma, can you share your idea of the value chain with us, of the new finance value chain? Do you want to collaborate with us and just let us know what that is?
Yeah, I don't have with me.
No, but at some time. Yeah. Okay, Ian, do you want to carry on with?
Yep. Okay, so you want to buy some assets, you can use Nutmeg or co-vestor, i.e. partner with professional investment skills. You may want to trade on currencies via Gecko, who the other currency trading platforms may use something called Digital Vega, which is a trading platform for FX options. You've got the funding platforms, Crowdcube or Seeders. You can actually lend money from them or lend money to them. Loans, you've got a whole range of people who are now providing loans and cards to you. Wongo, Borrow, Finance a Car. Circle here, risk assurance, pension. In North America, there's a lot of new innovation going on to evaluate your 401k, but it doesn't seem to have come across the Atlantic. Investor B do have a really good search engine, and but there's not a lot of innovation in that box. But to come back to it, at all at each juncture of each of these circles, you've got social media, points and games and news flowing through it, creating a different kind of flow of information about financial services than the traditional marketing channels. Here we go. The world's scale of investment, $11 billion, 4 billion on acquisitions, 7 billion on investments. USA's 2/3, 7 billion. UK, 3 billion. Rest of the world, 1 billion. London, in total, 3.2 billion spent. You can see all the different kinds of companies here. We have a very, very large, effective rate of innovation going on, and it's being funded. Then we come to the strategic wheel.
Okay, the reason I wanted to get to this one is, if you pause for a moment, take a look at this, and if you've seen the report, you'll have seen this too. What this purports to do is to take the FinTech Strategic Space and segment it. So that's a really interesting point if you're an innovator, because clearly this does the work for you, working out what that space looks like and which segment you might enter and who the participants are, how much money they've already invested or how much has already been invested, and how populated those various segments are. I don't know how many of you have seen this. The report went out yesterday. Can I just ask, are there any segments missing here? Is anyone here in a segment that's not up there?
Hi, Mark Wheeler, spendlesave.com. Yeah, we're commoditizing the data within the saving data, and if somebody is saving for something or their current account, you've got huge amounts of data. So what we're doing is commoditizing that for credit unions and mutuals and the smaller financial services companies that move faster. So that isn't represented here. At least I can't see.
Big data?
Data and insight, or what would you call that segment?
Yeah, we're mining our own data, but it's that's fair enough. I didn't look hard enough.
No.
I think there are more segments part of your current segment. So for example, if I'm looking at the P2P, you have market invoice there. Market invoice for me is supply chain. It's not so much, the P2P area covers many functions, and supply chain is one. If you want to do P2P in personal loans is one thing. If you want to do P2P in supply chain is a different thing. You have a different competitor groups for each of these subsets of the P2P, and P2P segment is one of the biggest in terms of innovation, and I believe that segment needs to be further broken down.
Hi, my name's Joe. I'm from Funding Options. I just wanted to say that the first slide was all very much about an individual, and there's a lot of business finance applications there, and that I just wanted to point out that's a massive sector within fintech at the moment, business finance in particular.
Right. I just want to say one short thing about challenger banks. 800 million has been invested in them, and the fact that probably Handelsbanken is probably the largest challenger bank. It has 200 branches in the UK, and is predicated on the philosophy that people like to go and see a bank manager, surprisingly enough. So that's a different way of competition in the UK market. The more challenger banks we can get in the UK, the better. So the strategic space, where is it empty? A full e-bank. I could only find one. You're now going to prove me wrong. Fido Bank AG. That comes from Germany and has a full banking license and is also listed on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. As a bank?
I got the registered bank in Luxembourg.
Yeah, okay, right, good. It's not a... I couldn't find their banking license when I looked into it. It seemed to be more of an aggregator rather than a pure bank. But I take your point.
M-Bank in Poland, so it's a mobile bank in Poland. They have a lot of Polish customers here as well. Just M-Bank.
That's more of a telephone banking one. Deposit taking, is it a deposit taking institution? It's more of a transfer rather than a full deposit taking and lending institution. I come to M-Pesa. I got M-Pesa at the very end of my presentation, but again, in terms of a full deposit-taking institution, M-Pesa isn't there yet. So I think that's a massive space. Feeder bank, you get a bigger interest rate if you have more likes on Facebook. Yeah, it's true. Look up their website. Looking at London, an aggregated bank like Simple Bank in the USA. That seems to me enormous space. Lending and process, again, massive space. There just seems to be a little bit of innovation coming into the UK. There's Easy Bob and iWoker, whom will finance eBay traders. But in the US, Cabbage is absolutely massive. Markets and exchanges, again, there's some innovation, but there's a massive space. Peer-to-peer, we got started, but again, massive space. Personal financial managers tend to operate upon simplistic scoring systems. So if there's anybody out there who knows about artificial intelligence and semantics, putting brains into financial planning managers. Insurance, completely, totally, utterly empty, with the exception of one company called Climate Corp, bankrolled in the States by 100 million's worth of VC funding. You send, it's crop insurance, you send in your premium, say $10,000. If your crop fails, you don't need to do anything. They will send you the check by virtue of satellite monitoring and rainfall monitoring. So you don't have to do anything. It's purely automatic. It seems to me to be quite innovative in terms of its process for insurance. So insurance is completely empty. So where else?
Why is insurance such an empty area? Because it would seem to me to be a very obvious consumer play, given that everyone obviously has insurance and all sorts of different things.
I think there's a lot of regulation which makes it even worse than the FSA. However, when you actually look at the Lloyd's Act, the act which has set up Lloyd's and mutual insurance companies, if you want to do something in that line, they can't stop you because there's 250 years worth of law. Right? I have been looking at it myself, a peer-to-peer insurance company. That's one idea I had. You've got to use existing legal frameworks, otherwise you're getting to a massive battle with the FSA regarding what you want to do. But don't give up if you have an idea in insurance. If I had £10,000 and wanted to invest in an insurance syndicate because the rate of return on the average syndicate is 17%, how do I do it? I can't, can I? No?
Yeah, I think you're potentially being a bit purist about the definitions that you're using, because if you're talking about insurance being empty, you've got some really great brands that the UK has come up with, things like Go Compare, comparethemarket.com. to extend that space to other types of brands. You've got things like WeBuyAnyCar.com, and they are not necessarily absolutely purist internet plays because they're still fitting into an existing infrastructure, but they've got an almost entirely internet-based consumer-facing offer and an internet-based brand. So how tightly do you want to draw the net around these things? My suggestion is that you perhaps need to open it up a bit to see the competitive landscape that's being built here, because I think you're missing out some really cool stuff that the UK is doing.
Yeah. Well, that's distribution channel. I was looking at the wholesale the concept I was using there, taking stuff directly from wholesale to the consumer.
But you've got reinsurance that's again done on a very much internet-based basis, so the whole market is being conducted online. And I just think, I fear by being so purist about it, you're missing some great brands. I'm not saying that there's no value in what you've done. I just think that potentially being a little bit more loose about it would be helpful.
I don't disagree with you at all. In terms of marketing, there's some great innovation going on, but there's not an internet-based insurance company anywhere in the world. I can't find one.
I actually agree with your statement, and I think what we can see right now is, as you said, those are user interface distribution channels that are using web platforms. But in the sense of reinventing the way in which we are delivering insurance, that is not happening because of the regulation and the big capital requirements that you need.
That's Fido Bank, just to give you a very, very quick feel for the constituent parts of their account. The USA, the main thing to take from this slide is the size of the money being put in by the VC community. LifeLock IPO'd last Wednesday. And it's a security system, a web security system for $876 million. But look at all of those companies with $100 million and in excess of $50 million funding. There's serious finance going on in there. Web 2.0 again, is it going to be dominated by the United States? That's my question. Europe and rest of the world, only $1 billion out of the $11 billion, but there's some real quality there. Zero, Kalmar out of Sweden. I think that's my BMW slide regarding the quality of the startups. Success, what does it look like? 3.7 million acquisitions, 3.7 billion's worth of acquisitions, a whole range of them. The biggest one being, if I can read my own slide, actually in London, $520 million acquisition of data cash by MasterCard. So you can make big money in London. And finally, M-Pesa. It's Britain's largest mobile e-bank, but it's in Kenya. It's operated by Vodafone. It was actually started off by virtue of seed fund from DFID, the Department for International Development. It has £123 million worth of revenue. And all I'd say is look at some of the stories on YouTube about the impact that M-Pesa has had on people's lives. Absolutely incredible. And that's it.
Okay, does anyone have any final comments on this report? Okay, I'll just take a couple.
It's more of a question, actually. What are the takeaways from the slides in the sense of where should the entrepreneurs be concentrating? What should they be doing, essentially, based on that?
I think big. Either an e-insurance company or an e-bank.
Even with all the regulatory hurdles?
You get over the hurdles, right? And I think the regulatory environment might be changing, Andy Haldane, the Director of Financial Stability of the Bank of England, made a comment about the peer-to-peer lenders last March. He said, they're small at the moment, but 15 years ago, Google was small. So I think that and he's going to be the man in charge of regulating banking from the next 3 or 4 weeks. So I think that the regulatory door is one to be pushed open. Don't give up.
Just an interesting comment on regulation. I'd question whether you want to push the regulatory door open. If you talk to friends of mine who work at Betterment in the US, they have a 30-person organization. They've just been told by the regulators that they need to do segregation of duties and air gapping of their environments, which means they have to double their staff in a 30-person organization because of regulation. I think we've really underplayed the role of regulation here. If you look in the first bubble graph you showed, if you go back to it, regulation is sort of sitting off on the edge. If you look at any of the processes in the mainstream banking sector, they're all touched by regulation. So accounts are touched by PII. You've got in investment banking MNPI. You have, if you look at, security, that's obviously touched by regulation. Financial advisors are touched by regulation. Everything in banking is touched by regulation. To underplay it, I think, is a big mistake.
I completely agree with you, but I think regulation has got to become online, and it's got to become a platform as a service. Regulation's got to reinvent itself because it's a barrier to innovation, and we've not got to let them get away with it to keep the incumbents in their position of power.
Do you not feel the incumbents are in? Do you not feel the position of the incumbents is often harmed more by regulation?
I think if we use the new technologies available, we can develop a new paradigm for regulation, because you can look at the screen and you can see your bank going bust. Right? Why don't they put their balance sheet on the web daily so you can see where they are? And if you see the tier 1 capital reducing, right? maybe you might want to transfer your account.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, there's an opportunity for someone to build a tier 1 capital viewing screen for banks. Well, all I'm going to say is we've started producing reports on the new finance, and I don't think this is perfect, but it's a version 1, and we're always in beta. So I think it's quite a brave attempt by Ian to try and map out the strategic space. I think that's a good thing to do. I don't think it's complete. We're building a new platform, and this will turn into an online resource. So it's not quite perfect, but I've not seen anyone else try and do it. And so there's a call for collaboration in here, and you need to tell us and help us get this right, because it's actually, from even where I sit, and I have a big network now of people in fintech, it's still quite bewildering. I mean, I still don't really get the whole space. I mean, everyone I talk to is doing something new or something different. It's very difficult. Did you just want to?
Yeah.
Last thing, then we're going to wrap this part up.
I just wanted to make one comment on the slides. I think one important slide would be the consumer or the person or the business, and then the needs that they have around that. So I know that you had a flow diagram with some different things that a person or a business did, but it would be very interesting to start with a person or a small or medium-sized business or a large business, and then think, what are the transactions that they have to do, or what are the things that they have to do around that? And that might be one way to make sense of what's around that. Just a comment.
Thanks for that. Thanks for the speakers too.